Welcome back to the Inspirathon for 2023. We're going to move to our next guest and speaker coming from across the ditch here in Australia, which is New Zealand. And that's Samantha Gadd. So a little bit about Samantha first. She's an experienced founder, business leader, and she is an expert around employee engagement. She is based in New Zealand, as I've mentioned several times now. She's involved in a couple of countries. I'm very interested in, firstly, doing a better introduction for the next speaker, but secondly, understanding her role between two companies, Excellent and also Humankind. In 2022, Samantha led a group of 34 contributors to write an EX Manifesto for the world. It defined employee experience, the values of EX and principles of EX design. Having worked with hundreds of organizations advising leaders on how to design compelling and meaningful EX to achieve better business outcomes, Samantha is an expert in how to use co-design as a way forward in today's world of work. In her talk today, Revolutionizing Work, Crafting the Employee Experience Manifesto, she's going to explore transformational power. You think it's the middle of the night here. It's not. It's the first thing in the morning. Around human-centered workplaces and the role of the manifesto. I'd like to welcome Samantha to the Inspirathon.
Thanks, Carl. It's great to be here, especially because we're kicking off. We're talking from the future to the rest of the audience.
Pretty much. Yes. How are you?
Really good, thanks. Yeah, I'm great. I'm looking forward to the session.
Yeah, very good. I apologise for the stumbling over your introduction, but you seem to have done so many things that it's really very impressive. I'd love to hear more. Looking forward to hear more about it.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I'll do a little bit of an intro before I kick into the main content too. So yeah, I'm ready to go. Awesome. Thanks, Carl. Hey, thank you everyone who was involved in putting on this event. I can only imagine what it takes to put on a 24-hour event, and hats off to you all. Really excited to be here. Really excited to be chatting about the EX Manifesto. It's a project that I'm incredibly proud of. Before I kick off talking about that, I would love to talk a little bit about my background. So as Carl said, I'm calling in from New Zealand today, born and raised in New Zealand. I have 3 incredible and beautiful boys who I'm very proud of, who are 14, 13, and 10. So deeply into parenting teenage boys, which is a passion of mine and something I love talking about. I'm also very, very passionate about employee experience, and I am on to founding my 3rd company. So Humankind is a business I started 11 years ago here in New Zealand. It's the largest and leading employee experience and HR consultancy here. During that journey, I also created a company called Kin, which is a talent agency, and I exited that in 2020. And then last year launched Excellent, which is really an organization with global ambition, taking our thinking out into the world. And so today I'm the founder and co-CEO of Excellent. We're a technology company building an incredible employee intelligence and design platform. And I truly feel like I'm doing my life's work. I feel like everything I've done to date has led me here. I really believe the world has massively changed over the last few years, and certainly in my career in HR and employee experience. And the challenge that I see is that we're still trying to work with best practice and operating models from at least before the pandemic, and even maybe from before that. And the reality is organizations aren't going back to what they were like before. And best practice by very nature is actually old practice. So it's kind of crazy that we're using these methods, operating models, processes that we've applied in other organizations over the last decade and trying to put them into organizations today. Organizations today have multiple generations in the workplace, and I heard Carl mention that before. We're hybrid, we've got burnt out workers, we've got employees looking to their organizations to respond to every political and social world issue that's going on. And let's be honest, leading an organization or being a leader in an organization today is really, really hard. Generation Z are simply just opting out and joining the gig economy. I mean, the gig economy in the US is growing at 3 times the rate of the workforce. That is like the employee value propositions just aren't even speaking to them. So I think for organizations to remain relevant and certainly to remain competitive, we must change. And really the only way that we can create compelling propositions for future generations is to use employee experience design. I'm going to talk about that in detail today. I think that it's critical that solutions that we're designing for our organizations today are fit for purpose. So that was a little bit about me. I am talking about the EX Manifesto today, and maybe I'll kick off with why we actually embarked on this project, because it was a big project. My co-founder joined me at Excellent last year. She's incredible. Her name's Jenny Beesing, based in the US. And when she joined me, she actually has a really interesting background, which I won't go into in too much detail, but what you do need to know, she's basically never been an employee. And here she is joining an employee experience startup. And she really embarked on trying to deeply and quickly learn about what employee experience is. And what she realized is that there was no common definite definition. And in fact, EX is being misused everywhere. And I've spent my whole career in this space. And when I was leading Humankind, we spent a lot of time defining what employee experience is and how it's different. And what I can tell you is that employee experience is not just another name for HR. Employee experience is about being employee-centric, and HR is generally very company-centric. So I'll talk a little bit about that today. And I really deeply believe that employee experience and employee experience design is going to be an enormous category which needs new mindsets, new skills, new tools, and more. There's going to be a lot that happens here. So we wanted to really put a flag in the sand about what this actually is. And to be honest, we were really inspired by the Agile Manifesto, because anyone that knows the story about the Agile Manifesto will know that it was 17 dudes got around a table, decided that project management and technology just was no longer working. And so they were like, let's put out a way of doing this differently. And they wrote the Agile Manifesto, and 20 years later, Agile is now an enormous industry with all sorts of stuff going on. So we were inspired by that project. So when we embarked on writing an employee experience manifesto, we could have just done this ourselves, but we decided not to do that. We really wanted to take a highly collaborative approach. We also really wanted to do it with people that we deeply respected and admired. And the first person that came to mind for us was Mark Levy, who was, I'm sure many of you will know who he is. He's the pioneer of employee experience. He was the very first global head of employee experience at Airbnb. And listening to his story about what Airbnb thought employee experience was and how they executed it 8 or so years ago on a podcast all the way from New Zealand really inspired my career and changed the trajectory of my consultancy, my career, and ultimately led me to founding Excellent. So I've been really inspired by his work. So my first job was to get in contact with Mark and bring him in. And he described me as tenacious because I didn't relent until he said yes to being part of this project. And now I'm just so pleased that Mark is a very good friend. He's also an advisor to Excellent, and he's been extremely helpful in this work. But really pulling in him was the beginning of pulling in a bunch of really cool people. And what we ended up with before we decided to embark on this project is, as we embarked on this project, is leaders from incredible organizations with very diverse thinking. We had leaders from Patagonia, Airbnb, Shopify, IBM, just to name a few of the incredible brands represented. We also had people leaders, employee experience leaders, HR thinkers, product thinkers, brand thinkers, so very sort of diverse skills. We had representatives from Gen Z and all the other generations. Diversity was incredibly important to us when we pulled together this group. And it was a really fun job to sort of collect these people. And here's a beautiful picture of the group that worked together in person. We had a much bigger group, but some of them were virtual contributors. And how I'd describe all of them as extremely humble, low ego, and very collaborative. And what we've done with this group post this work is actually just recently formed the Global Employee Experience Council. Watch this space, more coming out on that soon if you can connect with me on LinkedIn. But really, this was the beginning of that. What we wanted to do as we embarked on this project is really dissect the Agile Manifesto, see how they might have arrived at what they did and how it's had such a big impact. And when we did that, we really sought contributions for our virtual contributors first and then brought it together everyone for an in-person workshop in Austin, Texas. Then we had the very hard job of pulling it together and writing the actual manifesto. The Agile Manifesto was launched the Employee Experience Manifesto was launched in December. Bloomberg exclusively covered the release, and now it's been signed by hundreds and hundreds of people all over the world and actually in over 30 countries. So extremely proud of the project. So let's jump into the manifesto because that's what we're here to talk about. First of all, we wanted to define employee experience and how it relates to culture. I think a lot of people sort of use culture, employee experience, employee engagement. They use those words in lots of different ways. And we wanted to really sort of define how they work together. And for us, we really believe that culture belongs to the organization. It's the better the culture is, the more value sits in the organization. The only thing that truly belongs to employees is their experience. So how we believe it all works together is that workplace culture, or culture, is the collective experience of work. Employee experience is the individual experience of work. And then employee experience design, which we'll talk about in a second, is the mindful creation of employee experiences. So we think that employee experience design defines employee experience, and then employee experience shapes workplace culture, and then workplace culture elevates org performance. So ultimately, it all links through to organization performance, which is really important for all of us that need to be influencing and working with CEOs, or if you are a CEO, we know that it has to have an impact on the bottom line. So that was where we started with the definitions. Ultimately, we wanted to outline the core values when we think about employee experience and how these really exemplify the focus on EX. And these are really interesting, and I can tell you a little story about each of these and how they came to be. But you can see that they kind of each are a bit of a spectrum. So the first value, work is enriching over work is extractive. This is such an important way of thinking about employee experience. I think for a very, very long time, work has been very extractive of humans, and organizations have focused on how do we get more out of our people? How do we get them to go the extra mile? And like the whole engagement space is fascinating to me, because really it's about how do you get employees to go the extra mile? How do we get more out of people? I think employee experience is the opposite. It's like, how do we enrich employees' lives with the perspective that if we do that, ultimately they're going to want to give more to the organization. And this value was really inspired by the work of Patagonia. Patagonia asked their employees the question, do you get out more than you put in? And they ask that question on a regular basis. And I think that is incredibly motivating, incredibly inspiring. I also think it's very courageous, because not many organizations would want to ask that of their people. But imagine asking your employees, do you get out more from this relationship than you put in? Is work more enriching than it is extractive? I would say that most leaders and most organizations are possibly too scared to ask that question, and also know that the answer would be no. So it's a really good value and aspirational thing for us to be aiming for. So that's the first value in the values of the EX Manifesto. The second value is a really interesting one. I think there's been this narrative that we're all fighting for this tiny pool of top talent that everyone wants. And, while there are obviously phenomenal people out there, I don't really think that we should be talking about a tiny pool of top talent that every person is fighting for. I really believe that humans come to work, want to do great work, and can be incredible. And often it is the environment that they're in, and the experience that they're having, and the leadership they experience, and the context they understand, that enables them to be either incredible or not. And so the second value is about unlocking talent over fighting for talent, with a real belief that if we provide people the right environment and the right experience, that anyone can be top talent. And I love this, because it's really about believing the best in people. And I from my experience of employing so many people over my career, I know that people come to work, they want to do a great job. They want to leave at the end of a day, at the end of a week, the end of a quarter, feeling like they've nailed it. And really, if they're not, it's kind of up to leaders to be able to provide them the context, the understanding, the role clarity that they need to be able to do that. So I love that second value. It's all around believing that great talent is everywhere. The last value is the most pointy of the three, and it was definitely the biggest sort of sticking point for this work, because it was a collaborative effort. We actually had a couple of people who I deeply admire and respect, who are involved in the original project, that essentially opted out of signing the manifesto because they couldn't sign their name to this value. And that's because a lot of organizations have a value of customer first. And I'm really always up for the conversation with anyone that wants to chat about this value, but I deeply believe, and I really had to hold strong when it came to writing the final version of this manifesto with our team, that it really should be employee first over customer first. Now, the reason we believe this to be so strongly is that organizations do not serve customers. Employees serve customers. It is almost impossible for an organization to serve customers directly without employees. So if we think about the value exchange, organizations serve employees, employees serve customers, and then customers ultimately serve back the organization via revenue and then therefore profit. it's really hard to skip the employee in that value exchange. And therefore, from our perspective, really the primary role for an organization is to serve employees. If you serve your employees first, they will serve your customers. Ultimately, it all ends up that customers have a great experience. So yeah, employee first over customer first, very pointy value. It's the one that Bloomberg, when they covered the release of this work, really honed in on. And one of the things that I think is really fascinating about this space is you wouldn't find many business leaders, CEOs, founders that don't know the cost of acquisition and the cost of churn of a customer. However, I would say there's very, very, very few that know the cost of acquisition and the cost of churn of an employee. And then to add to that, I think the cost of acquisition and the cost of churn of an employee is often more expensive than a customer. So to me, that's crazy. It's really interesting. And I feel like CX as a domain and an industry has grown really rapidly and really fast. And I feel like EX has got to take that same pathway because of that, the costs involved. So those are the 3 values in the manifesto, and we'll move on to the principles next, but they're a really good starting point. And I will talk at the end of the session about how you can utilize this work within your own organization and how you can start having conversations around it. Okay, so moving on to the principles of employee experience design. We landed on 7 core principles of how to go about designing and changing our organizations. And all of these are really practical and can be put in place immediately. So you don't have to wait for the next massive org design. You don't have to wait for a big project that you haven't yet started. These principles and the mindsets behind employee experience design really can be implemented from the next conversation you have with a leader, from the next conversation you have with an employee. The stuff is applicable immediately, and that's what I love about this work. So the first one really talks to mutual benefit. And, when people are talking about employee experience, often that gets related to, it's the soft, fluffy stuff, it's the ping pong table, it's the benefits. And it's like, no, I mean, those things are all well and good. But the thing is, employee experience is often, it's the 95% of time where employees are just doing their job. It's the role clarity. It's the tools and technology they're using every day. It's how they show up to work, where they show up to work. And focusing on solutions that have mutual benefit for both employees and the organization is critical when we're thinking about employee experience design. And I think this is where a lot of HR and people practitioners can really lean into understanding the mutual benefit for the organization and for employees through these design processes. The second principle is that it's all around leaders absolutely needing a belief that employees hold value. And for us as leaders, our job is to provide our employees context of what's happening out in the world and what's happening in our organization and which direction we're heading and what our strategy is. But you know what? Employees have so much value and so much context they can provide leaders back. So this second principle is really about taking that human-centered approach that really encourages leaders understanding that employees hold value and they actually have more context about what's happening in your organization than often that they're asked for. So this trust that employees have value and that their voice holds weight needs to exist before giving this a go. Second principle. Okay, the third one is around employee experience never being done. So I think, this is a continuous process. And what I was saying earlier is you don't need to wait for a big project. You certainly, like every part of your organization is consistently evolving, consistently changing. And just like with customer experience, you wouldn't think, great, we've got our customer experience set and forget. You're constantly evolving it. You're looking for more data about how our customers are interacting with us, what they're loving, what they're not loving, what's happening with your customers, what's happening in our customers' lives that changes the needs entirely from what they need from us. It's exactly the same with employee experience. It's a continuous process of investigation, ideation, implementation, and measurement. We've got to continuously be in that discovery mindset where we're always listening to find out what's happening in our organizations. Okay, number 4 is, this is probably one of my favorite ones. So design with, not for employees. This to me is the big unlearning that I had to do from my early HR career, from being an HR practitioner to an employee experience designer. I think as HR practitioners, and this is certainly my experience, we were taught to design beautiful frameworks and policy or whatever we were doing for employees. And that might have involved potentially seeking a little bit of feedback in the interim, but, sitting in our HR team and designing these frameworks and making them all shiny and beautiful and then presenting them out to our organization. And then we wonder why so many of the initiatives that many of us have worked on in our careers just haven't really gained traction or haven't had the influence or impact that we thought they might. And it's because we were designing for employees. We weren't designing with. It's really important at every single step along the process, not just at the beginning when you're seeking a bit of feedback, that employees are involved and that you've got a representative group of employees involved in the design process. And I will point out here that often in our organizations, we're doing an okay job at seeking feedback from employees. And I think where the real opportunity is seeking input. And input is very different from feedback. When we're asking for feedback, we're asking what people think about what we've already done or already decided. And we really miss an opportunity to ask employees like what they think could happen or what their ideas are. And it's incredible when you do that, if the employees have really good context of what's happening in the organization, the strategy, the constraints, etc., employees can give incredible input. And the fear that I've heard from many people around me over my career is, what if employees are unreasonable? Or what if employees want things that we just can't do? But actually, I've not found that to be true. I think it's really about trusting that employees want the best for the organization, because ultimately the organization also serves them, and that employees will have real true value that is very much reasonable to provide in the process. And so it's really important that we design with, not for employees. That's number 4 is critical. Okay, we're on the home straight. We've got 3 more. The 5th EX design principle from the manifesto is around welcoming those tough conversations. We should not be shying away from challenge. I think this is where the best shifts happen in our organizations. And if we aren't experiencing challenge or those tough conversations, I would say that's a signal that we don't have enough trust. Conflicting views when you're doing a design process is really important for generating new ideas. And what we need to understand is the complexity of our organizations means there's never one right answer that's been applied before. We're having to really solutionize together. So we should be welcoming these tough conversations and see that as a real positive, that we're building trust in our organizations. Okay, number 6. I think we are wrong if we think that employee experience sits just with HR. We need to make sure, as if we're in people roles or HR roles, we need to be using our influence to ensure that our CEOs, our C-suite, and our leaders really understand the importance of the employee voice, and that we also know that people leaders, line leaders, have the most impact on a day-to-day employee experience with employees. It's not the HR team or the people team. So it's really important that we share ownership of employee experience and bring in people from across the organization when we're running employee experience design projects. And then the last principle is really about how we measure sort of performance and maturity of employee experience design. So the bottom line results will show performance when you are not wasting your time on initiatives that don't stick because they haven't been designed with, when you're getting fit for purpose solutions that have been designed with employees and they have immediate pickup because employees have been involved in the process. You don't have to worry about spending a lot of time influencing people to pick it up or use it. That will show in your bottom line results. I think maturity in employee experience design is really how much employees have a say in the shape of their own employee experience or the design, of the decisions that impact them. So that's a really good measure of what's happening in our organizations and how we continuously involve employees in those conversations. What I do know is that employees want a voice in the decisions and the experiences that impact them. My personal vision is that every employee has a voice in the decisions and experiences that impact them. I desperately want that autonomy and that agency for myself. That's why I'm a founder. But I do believe that employees can have that too. And for us to remain relevant, for our organizations to be able to attract and retain these incredible people and these new generations coming through, we're going to need to ask them. We're going to need to involve them in what are the employee value propositions, or what does it mean to have an employee value proposition that really speaks to them? We don't know that. We can't know that. We're not them. So it's really important that these principles work really well. Okay. So a couple more things before I finish up. The Employee Experience Manifesto, what we've landed on, we really feel like this can be a guide for the next generation of practitioners in this space. We really want to use this piece of work to raise the profile of employee experience so it sits in its rightful place as a strategic lever in an organization. And we really want this to be accessible and distributable for everyone. So this is not something that only, me and my company Excellent own. It's really about writing this for the world. And we would love to see you sparking conversations, bringing it to life in your products and your services in your organization. And the first place to start, if you're wondering, you can go onto the exmanifesto.com website. I would love you to co-sign it. That would be amazing. If you love it, provide us with your feedback. But the first place to start is print it off, download it, share it with leaders and spark conversations. And one of the cool things you can do with it is those values that we started with earlier in this conversation, the 3 values, you can use them as a bit of a spectrum. So you can have workers enriching over workers extractive. And you can actually say to leaders, where do you think we are today on the spectrum? Is work enriching here? Is it extractive? Or where would you put us on a spectrum? And then you can say, where would you like us to be? Or where would you think employees think we are on the spectrum? And then where should we be? Or where would we like to be? And how do we fill that gap? And you can use each of those values to say, where are we now? From a leader perspective, where do you think our employees would rate us? Or if you're really brave, ask your employees how they would rate you. And then maybe how can you move further up the spectrum? I think that's a really easy way of using the manifesto. But certainly all those principles can be applied to any project, anything that you're working on, should you wish to use it. We would love you to, and I'd love some feedback. So I'm nearly out of time. I just want to say thank you so much for having me at this awesome event. I love talking about all things employee experience, all things new world of work. Please connect with me on LinkedIn should you wish to. And if you're up for it, co-sign the manifesto. And if anyone has any feedback about this session, I am totally ready for that as well. So thank you so much for your time and for the incredible team that put this event together.
Samantha, stay with us for a second. I've got a couple of questions for you. That was brilliant. Yeah. Thank you very much. I really love that your ideology and the more popular ideology of productive, healthy culture is very well aligned. I do have some quick questions though for you. So, I've been hanging around big organizations for 30 years, and the biggest frustration for me is antiquated dinosaurs in the boardroom that don't understand what needs to happen. So some of the things that you've talked about there, when you say you correctly and rightly said that employee experience is often seen as fluffy and ping pong tables are nice to have. You and I know that's not the case, particularly as it's the major contributing element to cultural health. But how do we get cut through in the boardroom?
I think that's a really good question to ask. And I think we have to show them, we have to prove it. And what I would say is that we could take the hardest problem that our organization is facing today. And I think many leaders would say, how on earth are we going to make this hybrid work? That's a big problem that many organizations are facing. Are we bringing people back to the office? If we bring them back 2 days a week, what do people think? That whole where we work thing is a big problem. If you're in an organization and you want to influence your C-suite, influence the CEO, use employee experience design with employees to solve for the hardest problem that's being faced in your organization and show them that it works. I think that's the best way to do it, because we can talk and talk and talk, but ultimately, if our leaders don't believe that employees have a really valuable contribution, they're not going to do it. So we need to show them that employees have ideas that make our organizations better. And I think that's like the fast way to do it. I also think that these dinosaurs, they're going to go extinct, just like their organizations, if they can't attract that new talent in. So that's the long way. I don't want it to happen like that. I'd much rather let's show them how it's done.
Yeah, it's an interesting time, isn't it? They go extinct or they get cancelled, which is certainly what we've seen more often than not. Look, thanks so much for contributing today. That was really interesting. I personally found it wonderful listening to you. I'm going to be following you and looking at the manifesto in great detail, and hopefully looking to do something together with you at some point in time.
That'll be great. Thank you so much for the opportunity, and I hope the rest of the 23 odd hours go well. Good luck with the Red Bulls.